Hello everyone, welcome to another session of Facebook Live with Go Erie and the Erie Times-News. My name is Ed Palattella. Cover education for the paper, and I'm joined here today with my Superintendent Brian Polito, the Erie School District, Eric Seibert, the School District's Director of Facilities and Maintenance, and V. Habursky, the School District's Assistant Superintendent. Appreciate you being here with us today. You've been here a number of times before, so
yes.
we appreciate you being here. Eric, this is your first time, so we'll be kind to you, but we appreciate you being here. So what we're going to talk about today is a couple of topics that have been in the news quite a bit lately. The Erie School District building program that the superintendent has proposed and that the school board is considering, and then we're going to talk about the latest test scores for the school district. We had a story in yesterday's paper and on Go Erie about that, and V. Habursky later in our conversation is going to talk about what the test scores mean and what the school district is trying to do about them and how they're moving forward on that very important issue. So to get started, Superintendent, if you could just explain for us what the building project entails, why you're doing it, basically the scope of the plan at this point.
Well, we've been deferring construction and maintenance on our buildings for a number of years just because of our financial crisis. With the addition of the $14 million from the state, it gave us an opportunity to look at that. And it doesn't give us a lot of money to work with on our buildings, but it gives us enough to really address those most immediate needs. And so our mantra through this process has been warm, safe, and dry. And that's really what our architects focused on this summer. They actually went through and did an analysis of all our buildings, prioritized all the needs, and that's what they had presented to the board here a couple weeks ago.
And how much are we talking about in terms of the overall cost for the first phase is what, about $80.8 million, $81 million at this point?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and when you look at what we were looking at a couple years ago with the optimization plan, that was over $300,000 of work. So we've really scaled that back considerably, so we're focusing on just the immediate needs in the district.
I think it was $300 million for the optimization plan. Okay. Now, Eric, if you could just explain some of the highlights of the building project in terms of what we're talking about. I know there's a lot of roofs, parking lots, some of the security vestibules, so we can talk about that. And then I was remiss, we are taking questions today as well, so if you have any questions, please send them in, and Sarah Grabsky, our online reporter who's with us today, will field those questions, so thank you. So Eric, if you just explain some of the highlights of the plan?
Sure. So the plan is essentially what Mr. Polito said. It's warm, safe, and dry. So this would focus around a couple things. First thing is creating a building envelope that protects the inside environment from any rain, cold, etc. So that includes roofs, window replacements, repointing of brick, doors in some cases, and so that would be your building envelope. And some of our buildings have single pane windows that have been leaking for some time, and so those are certainly something that's slated for replacement, as well as a lot of roofs. So we have some roofs that are of an age, we don't even know how old they are, but they're old built-up roofs, and we have a lot of leaks, and those leaks cause problems inside the building, both from deterioration of the inside, floors, walls, ceilings, etc. Other things that are included in this, just from like a safety standpoint, would be secure entry vestibules and better locking arrangements, so that we can be sure that our doors are safe from anyone that's not authorized from entering the structure. And we're trying to plan that for all of our buildings. Other things that people might not think about, electrical systems. So we have electrical services that feed the buildings. And in some cases, they're very old and no longer fully functional. So electrical switchgear, emergency generator systems, things of that nature that are in serious need of upgrade. We also have things with HVAC. So the buildings need to be heated in the winter. There's no way around that to prevent people from being too cold or from pipes from freezing, things of that nature. And a lot of our HVAC systems are old and antiquated, but beyond that, there are certain components in the systems that have failed. And you know, most of it is just due to age and not being upgraded for a long period of time. So we're looking at a lot of work on that. In some cases, we're even looking at full building renovation. So particularly with Edison Elementary School, which has been in bad need of work for a long time. You have interior finishes in addition to the roofs, windows, things of that nature. And then there's asphalt. Anyone's driven through our parking lots, we have a couple that are, they've been patched over years and years, and they're in need of an upgrade, at least a full resurfacing. So generally, those are the types of things that we're focused on. All of them apply to the warm, safe, and dry concept, and all are pretty badly needed. So everything in this phase one, which was identified by both school district employees, the community, and by the architects that we hired to do this study, I think that anyone that looks at them closely would find them to be in need of repair.
Now, in terms of the HVAC, Eric,
Question. Sorry, not to interrupt you. Why use outside contractors and companies, or will you use outside contractors and companies for this kind of work?
We will. It's necessary for us to use outside companies. We're talking about 2 million square feet of floor space in our schools. There's no way that the school district could tackle a project of that size. We feel that we need to have that work done by outside companies, and importantly, we have certain standards that we're going to have to maintain. So we have the International Building Code that we need to be compliant with. So we need architects to develop plans, and these plans, even using outside resources and putting them into schools, a lot of them are going to be very ambitious to even get done in summers. And I'm talking about things like HVAC. It's going to be phased in over a number of years. If we have 2 heat HVAC techs in the district, there's no way that they could approach the level of work that we need. They don't have the qualifications and skills. They have tremendous knowledge and they're good at fixing things. But in the long run, we're going to have people help us through this.
And this work will be bid out, of course, as well. So,
yes, absolutely.
So now the bid process, and based on the amount of work that you've done before, certainly you can have local contractors bid on that. In many cases, they have received those jobs, and it's all going to depend on the final bids and if they're able to meet the specs of the work.
Right. If you look at just the work that we did on Erie High School to remediate the fire recently, it was all bid out, and it was all essentially local contractors, at least within a 60-mile radius of the school.
Another question that came from our the event page was, have you considered putting AC in some of the elementary schools for when the kids go back to school and it's really hot?
That's one of the things that certainly is something that we would like to have, but when we look at the scope and the amount of needs across the district, it's just something that's not going to make it to phase one. The only AC that we're going to be working on in phase one is actually repairing the AC units that currently don't operate in the district, and then there's certain areas, especially up at Erie High, where there's rooms with no classrooms, and they get close to 90 to 100 degrees during the summer. So those areas we will be looking at repairing the AC units in those buildings.
And Superintendent, you said at Erie High there's some classrooms where they used to open up onto the atrium, and then those windows, but there's no windows anymore.
They were courtyards at one point,
Okay.
and they decided to close them in and use them as classroom facilities, so they have no outside windows. And over the years, they had installed a AC unit in there to address that. And Eric, maybe you can talk about what they're planning in that area.
There were a number of strategies that they used, and none of them were that faulted. I mean, there was a chiller that functioned at Erie High that was intended for just what the superintendent said. It cooled those spaces that have no outside air intake, no cooling whatsoever, no windows. So those areas need to be cooled. They're horribly uncomfortable in the summer, and even in late spring and early fall. So there are some portions of that system that are still in place, but unfortunately a lot of things have been neglected, and we need to, one, repair and upgrade so that it's at least an environment that we can have students be educated in.
And that seems to be one of the themes here in terms of repairing and upgrading. Sounds like if you don't do this work now, it's just going to get worse. I mean, I was up in Collegiate, and you have areas where the water is just dripping through, and anyone knows owns a house, that can't go on forever.
Well, something I didn't mention when you asked me an initial question is, I didn't mention anything about structural integrity. So we have a couple of school buildings that have some structural issues. I know a lot of people have talked about the coal bunkers and the filling of those. And these are areas where we might have cars and trucks drive over, and we've had enough water infiltration over the years to cause damage to the beams and the columns that support that weight. So these are areas that we absolutely have to repair. Collegiate Academy has an area like that, and there's a number of others in the district.
And most of this work, really, if we don't address it now, we're going to have to address it as these things break down. And this really does it on a more thoughtful and organized basis, rather than just reacting to things that are breaking down. And in the long run, it will save the taxpayers money by doing it this way.
And it also sounds like you're doing it at a point now where you have the financial stability to do it.
Right.
So if we could just move on, Superintendent, if you could just explain the financing for this project, and then he will move on to you about the test scores. So if you could just explain how this is going to work in terms of the bond issue.
So with the $14 million for the first couple years in our projections, we do have a surplus within our budget. So we anticipate being able to save roughly $30 million to put towards this project. The additional $50 million will be done through a bond issue. And we're looking at a couple different options with that bond issue. One being increasing our current debt service by about $3 million a year, and paying those bonds off. It would extend our debt service out about another 7 years. Another option that we're looking at is not increasing our debt service at all in our current budget and really pushing that off over the back end, which that isn't ideal, but it would give us some more room in our budget moving forward. The board is going to take a look at both those options and our financial projections on December 1st, really pull those needs together on the building side, as well as the curricular needs that we have to really address our test scores, and really come up with a plan on December 1st to really determine how to do all of this.
And then we'll be discussing, I mean, if a tax increase is necessary, not necessarily to fund the building project, but all these other things.
Right, that's correct.
And then even still with that, you've been insistent that any increase be below the index.
Right. We want to try to, if we do have tax increases, we want them to be around cost of living.
Okay.
So more in the 2 to 3% range is what we're looking at. Again, that's just a projection. What we're looking at there is the worst case scenario. As always, we're going to continue to find ways to get that tax increase down. One of the areas we're really focusing on is going to be important in our plan is our charter enrollment. If we're able to stabilize our charter enrollment and start to bring kids back from charter schools, that will have a significant impact on the tax increase we have. So the more kids we bring back, the less the tax increase is going to be. So that's a level we're going to be working on very hard over the next few years to make happen.
And December 1st is the next big meeting on all this.
Yes.
So Bean, let's move on to you about test scores. So can you explain, last week was a big week for test scores. The PASA scores were out, and then the new Future Ready PA Index, which is the state's new online website for kind of a comprehensive look at all the test scores statewide and building-wide. So if you can explain what came out last week and how the district is faring with the latest scores.
Definitely. So with the Future Ready Index, which is the new system that they're using, they take achievement, which is what PSSA scores would give us, and that's for proficiency. So anyone who is proficient in their grade level, that's what we look for through achievement. They also sent out the growth, which is called PVOS, and it's value added. So it's when a student is in 3rd grade and they might be basic. If the whole year goes by and they stay basic, they get 1 year, they've maintained where they're at. The growth part of it would be, so if they're in 3rd grade and they are basic and they become proficient, that is beyond that year of growth. If they go down, that's below that year of growth. So they look at growth, we look at achievement. They also look at English language proficiency. They look at attendance for chronic absenteeism, and they look at careers and career readiness. Having enough artifacts so that that student can have at least 2 every year to say, these are some of the careers that are options that are out there for me in my future.
So how did the district do in terms of the scores? It looks like the PSSA, you still have a lot of work to do.
Yes.
With your growth, with areas of growth, there were some high points. So if you can just explain that.
Sure. So when we looked at the achievement part of it, we are below the state level of achievement in all of our schools. But some of the schools did go up. So we have some classrooms and some buildings that have been working, well, all of the buildings are working towards this, but we did see some success in a few. And so we look at that very carefully. We try to analyze what's happening in the buildings now, see what's working, and then try to replicate some of that. For the value added side of it with the growth, we saw a lot of more success with the growth. And then the same thing, we look at the data, we look at what schools are seeming to be working and where it's working and what are they doing, and trying to make sure that all of our schools are having that same opportunity. The other thing, and that would be for literacy, math, and science. Those are the 3 areas that we are really focusing on. When we look at the curriculum, because of the opportunity to have some additional funding, we are in the process of looking at our literacy for pre-K to 5. And our hope is that the committee will be able to bring a new series to the superintendent and to the board by January so we can begin that process. Then we also will be doing math for pre-K to 5, and currently our middle schools already have a math program that we just instituted last year, so we're monitoring that, and then we'll be looking at literacy in that age band of 6th through 8th grade. And then, of course, through high school, because of the reconfiguration, we are working on our pathways to make sure that we have opportunities for our students in all 5 of the pathways that the state has used and stated as their 5 pathways.
When's the last time the district has, if these curriculum changes go through, when's the last time the district has overhauled curriculum to this extent? I mean, it's been quite a while.
It's been a long time. For the English language arts, I think it was probably in the 90s that we did something. We did work with GE on our math curriculum and science curriculum, but a lot of that was done in-house, and it really doesn't provide the comprehensive materials that the teachers need to address average kids, higher kids, and lower kids. So that's one of the great things that we're going to see here with this curriculum refreshes, giving the teachers the materials they really need to do their job. And it's going to have an impact on scores. We know that. The other thing we're really looking at over the last 10 years, we cut out all the supports we had for the kids that aren't on grade level. That'll be a discussion on December 1st as well. We're looking to add back some interventionists to really target those kids that are struggling and bring them back up to grade level.
You said, Superintendent, the story we had yesterday, you said that you were pleased in that in a year of so much upheaval at the district with the reconfiguration, the closing of schools, the merging of high schools, that the scores largely at least stayed stable with some increases and some slight decreases. But you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. When we did the reconfiguration last year, there wasn't a building that wasn't affected by that. So every building had a different makeup of students than they had the year before. So many kids across the district, I think probably close to half of them were moved through this reconfiguration. So it was new teachers teaching new students. So this we're really pleased that we were able to maintain and actually go up a little bit. Especially in ELA, we saw a 2 to 3% increase in our achievement at the same time that the state was going down. So again, we're starting to close that gap, and that was done without the new curricular materials or the supports we're going to plan to put in for next year.
And then
Got a few questions about the low test scores. You kind of already touched on this, B, but with low test scores, will you be looking for, I think she's asking for alternative ways to effectively teach kids?
Absolutely. When it comes to the curriculum that we have, this curriculum will give us the opportunity to differentiate. So students who are mastered the skill, they can get some enrichment. Students who are proficient in that skill can do the additional work. But students who need interventions, the materials that we're looking at do provide materials for the teacher to work with the students on that, to try to get them to proficiency.
And she had a follow-up that's a little bit more specific, and this might be something she needs to talk to with her teacher or child's teacher or something, but how are these kids supposed to focus on schoolwork and raising test scores when they're being told they're essentially responsible for safety in their community?
Well, I'll interpret that by, that's an interesting question in that you have a lot of challenges in the district. 73% of your students come from economically disadvantaged backgrounds. You have 9% of students are English as a second language. You have many students, especially at Emerson Gridley, who are experiencing trauma in their lives, whether it's due to violence or depression or something. So you have a lot of challenges. Now, you've always said, both of you, that that's not an excuse. You've said that from the very beginning. But you do have different, you do have a different sets of challenges than maybe other school districts in more affluent areas. So I guess interpreting the question, how do you deal with all that in terms of, how are you able to get the kids focused on learning and increasing test scores when they have all these other things going on in their lives?
We have a lot of strategies in place on that, and I think that's when it goes back to our strategic plan. So when we received the $14 million, we just took a step back and said, how are we going to attack this in a very organized and focused way? So we went through our community driven process, and many of the things that you're talking about came out of that, and that's really under our goal 4 is equitable access to education and creating a warm, or not, I'm going back to the buildings now, but I guess a safe environment for our students at school. So we have a whole team that are focused on that. They're doing things like expanding the community schools to provide the supports to students, those exterior supports to students that really take their focus off education, like having clothing, like the mental health supports, bringing those things into the building so that they can be focused on their education. We're also working on school-wide positive behavior is another one that's big and came out of that plan, really expanding that so that we start to build the expectations in the school and hold those students accountable to each other for making sure that environment is a positive one.
So it sounds like at this point, with the strategic plan and everything else, that you're kind of brought everything together to form kind of a unified strategy to how to increase these scores and also help these students basically improve in their personal lives, because a lot of them are coming from areas that they're not coming from the best situation in many cases.
There's a kind of a broader question that kind of touches on what Ed exactly was saying. In what ways are you working to support transgender and gender non-conforming students? I bet that was a question you didn't think you'd be answering this morning, but
that's come up a number of times.
Yeah.
Tyler Titus on the school board has
Right.
brought that up, and even can you just explain, either one of you, what you're doing in that area?
Well, we did last year. We did hire Ken Nixon as our equity and diversity officer within the district. He actually has a committee in place that really addresses, not only some of the inequitable things with our Black and African American students, but also with our transgender. We do have people on that committee. That's one of the areas there. They discuss and work towards helping us become more accepting of all students to make sure that they're comfortable when they come to our school.
You want to add to that, Dee, in terms of that type of work that the committee's been doing?
No, I think with Positive School-Wide Support, that whole program, Character Be About It, the culture and climate, our hope is accepting of all people for who they are and where they're at, and to work towards having our students successful and becoming good citizens and part of the community.
In terms of the scores being the overall environment, working on that story for Sunday, I focused on a few areas where the scores have gone up quite a bit. Lincoln has done extraordinarily well. Grover Cleveland, I highlighted a math teacher where I think 15 percentage points the scores went up. In terms of that, trying to transfer what works in some classrooms into the others. I know at Lincoln they had that text-dependent analysis where it emphasized really reading the material and understanding it, able to answer questions. So how does that work? Do you meet as committees or district to try to move what works from one school to another? How does that work?
So the first step is our administration, to talk with our administration about what's happening in the buildings that they have. There's state standards that we all abide by, and so those state standards are very visible in all of the buildings. We're able to give them the learning progressions of what happens in first grade, what happens in second, third, to see what that progression looks like. In the buildings that we're seeing success, they're using that to drive the instruction, not just a curriculum or a book, but what do we need? What do those students need by the end of this school year? And ensuring that they're getting that information.
And Bee's done an outstanding job of really bringing the buildings together and starting to have those conversations. Before, they more operated in silos where each building would kind of do their own thing. She has monthly meetings with cohorts, so we have two groups of elementary principals and the middle and high school principals meet together and talk about what works and what doesn't work. Another thing that we're doing now is quarterly we have data summits where we pull together all our principals and all our instructional leadership teams in the district together to plan instruction for the next 6 to 12 weeks and give them that opportunity to collaborate and talk about what's working among each of the buildings.
So data sharing and then sharing experiences in terms of what's next. Mm-hmm. You never shied away that these scores are not where you want them to be.
Absolutely. We want our students to leave third grade proficient, able to read, and we want to make sure that our students are ready for the next grade and are achieving as much as we can, as they can. And we know they can do it. That's the thing. We know they can do it. We just need to get them where they can feel that as well.
I mean, certainly in some of the improvement that you saw, it shows that it can be done in a certain setting and using certain techniques. I mean, we're not suggesting that it's cookie cutter and everything's going to work in the same school, but there are strategies that have been successful.
Definitely.
So, is there anything else you'd like to add? We're just about ready to wrap up here. Eric, do you want to say anything more about the building? You're going to have a busy year next year.
Busy 3 years, actually.
Right. So
It's really exciting time for us. I think December 1st is going to be the culmination of all the planning that we've done on the building side and the curricular side over the last year. The board really get together and determine what we can afford moving forward. And my hope is we're going to walk away from that meeting with some direction on what we're going to do with the building so we can get started on getting that work done and with the curriculum so we will be able to hit the ground running in the spring with both of these initiatives.
thank you everyone for joining us this morning, and make sure you read the Erie Times-News and go Erie to see what's new with the Erie School District. Thanks again. Have a good holiday.